Good afternoon. Welcome to the Executive Mansion. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Alfonso David. I am the Chief Counsel to Governor Cuomo. It is my pleasure to welcome you all here today and to celebrate the work of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. Working together with the governor, we have achieved great progress over the past 5 years, and I know that we will build on that progress this year. Before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge a few elected officials that are here with us. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, Congressman Paul Tonko, New York City Advocate Letitia James, Darcel Clark, the District Attorney of Bronx County, Ken Thompson, the District Attorney of Kings County, Gail Brewer, the Manhattan Borough President, Melinda Katz, the Queens Borough President, and Carl McCall, the Chairman of SUNY Board of Trustees. And we have many other elected officials in the room as well. New York has always been the beacon of justice and fairness in this country. We have served as an example on how to address some of today's toughest challenges. And we're continuing to raise the bar today on issues of social justice, racial justice, and economic justice. So thank you all for being here today. Not only for being here today, I should say, but for fighting to ensure that our state continues to carry the banner of justice in this country. Now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce one of my favorite people, the leader of the Democratic Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
He's one of my favorite people, too, apart from, of course, our great governor. And, of course, now we have the opportunity to honor the dean of the congressional delegation, Charlie Rangel. So we're all happy to be here, Charlie. You know, many of us were in church this morning, and Reverend Daughtry said something that I thought was really interesting and true. She said, "Injustice wears skin. Injustice wears skin." And what we do here every day is about fighting injustices, fighting for those who don't have the opportunity, but for us to have their voices heard. And fighting together, we've been able to do so many great things. And obviously, there are more to do. But for New York State this year, we have accomplished a great deal, and we've managed to show the nation that we have what it takes to tackle some of our greatest challenges. You know, we already jump-started, and I always give my Senate Democrats a great deal of credit for partnering with the Assembly and with our governor to jumpstart marriage equality in this nation. We passed the comprehensive gun safety measures. And so in those ways, we're continuing to stand up for equality and justice for all. One of the issues that we are fighting hardest for this year with all of you is paid family leave. It's simply unacceptable that here in the United States, we continue, frankly, to be the only major country on the globe that doesn't offer paid family leave. It's not right. It certainly isn't what our country should be about, but more importantly, it is not what our state is about. So we're going to change that this year. We're going to change it because of the leadership of the governor. We're going to change it because of all of you who know, like me, that we will, in most probability, be in a circumstance where we need paid family leave. And we're also going to change it because we have great leadership in the Assembly. We have a historic leader in the Senate, the Assembly. We have the first African-American male speaker in the Assembly. We have my friend, Carl Hasty. Carl.
Thank you, Senator Cousins. First, let me say happy Valentine's Day to everyone. Let me acknowledge the Democratic Assembly members who are here. We have Assemblyman Keith Wright, Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes, Alicia Heinman, Assemblyman Marcos Crespo, the Chair of the Association, Assemblymember Michelle Titus, the Chair of the Caucus, Nick Perry, Assemblyman Michael Blake, Assemblymember Patricia Hunter, Assemblymember Guillermo Linares, Assemblyman John McDonald, Assemblyman Francisco Moya, Assemblymember Victor Pichardo, Assemblyman Angelo Santa Barbara, who brought his Valentine with him today, Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright. Her Valentine was up here yesterday. I don't know if he's still here. Assemblymember Mikhail Salages, and Assemblymember David Weprin. First, again, let me acknowledge particularly these three giants in our community, and pretty much they're responsible for why we gather here, this weekend, and it's on their shoulders that we stand. So I too want to join Andrea in saying hello to Congressman Garcia, who I saw in the hotel this morning, and he says to me, I left Puerto Rico, it was 82 degrees, to come here to minus 13 degrees. So I said, Congressman, when are you going back? He said, first thing in the morning. So take us with you, Congressman. And of course, our mayor, Mayor Dinkins. And then the dean of the delegation, Congressman Charlie Rangel. So I get the pleasure of introducing the governor, so I get to introduce my Valentine for the day. I told you I get to introduce you. Lucky you. So, but really, I do want to touch on a couple of things, about working with the governor in the partnership. And he's probably going to get me when he gets the mic. But he's become a tremendous partner in the fight for the minimum wage, and also for paid family leave. We believe that if you work 35 hours a week, you shouldn't have to live in poverty, and no one should have to worry about taking care of their family or getting a paycheck. So I'm happy to do that, but I really just want to point out one particular thing that he has done, which has kind of gotten lost, and I've tried to as much as I can going around and remind people of this. When I first became speaker last year, and we promised that we would double the opportunity programs over the next 5 years for our young people to go to college, and then last year we put in the first increase in 20%. And normally what governors do, they play the budget game. They'll take it back to what the legislature had before, they proposed, and the legislature has to come back and negotiate it. But I do want to say, in this year's budget, the governor actually baselined our increase in ELP, so he should get a big round of applause for that. And so as we get ready to go into this budget, the budget season, the budget negotiations, again, I want to acknowledge him, because I think that was really, really important. The message that it sends, not just because of the weekend, but because we really want to invest in the future of our young people. So with no further ado, could we give a warm welcome to the great governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo.
My Valentine. Things happen over the course of life, I want you to know. You get into a certain position, and now my Valentine, my speaker, Carl Hasty. Let's give him a round of applause for doing a great job. The Speaker has done a great job. He stepped in into a very difficult situation right in the sixth inning, I say, last year, and it was not easy. And boy, he stepped up and he stepped in, and he's been a fantastic leader. And remember, give him another round of applause. And remember this, the Assembly has historically started many of the progressive measures that we then wind up getting passed ultimately when we bring the Senate and the Assembly together. But you take things like pre-K, which is now going statewide. Pre-K, the Assembly started like 15 years ago. $15 as a minimum wage. The Assembly started it when it wasn't even the realm of possibility. Family leave, the Assembly started, so they have always been on the progressive vanguard. One more round of applause for all our friends who are here from the Assembly. Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins and all the senators who are here, pleasure to be with you, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Michelle Titus, who headed this weekend, give her a round of applause. And we have three giants, the three giants. Congressman Rangel, Congressman Garcia, and Mayor David Dinkins. Let's give them a round of applause. Now I'm going to have the pleasure to introduce Congressman Rangel, who we honor here today. But first, for those of you who haven't been here before, welcome. I think this is the largest crowd we have ever had in this mansion over the past 5 years. Charlie, you are quite a draw. If I knew this many people were going to come, I would have made it a fundraiser, tell you the truth. For those of you who haven't been here before, you should look around. It's a little cold, just a little cold. Otherwise, I tell you to go outside and see the Franklin Delano Roosevelt pool and the pool house that Rockefeller built. The original FDR pool is in the back, original tile, etc. When Franklin Roosevelt lived in the house, Al Smith, his predecessor and his friend, had started building a pool because FDR needed to work out his upper body. That's how he supported himself all the time. So the house has great history in it. Theodore Roosevelt lived here, Al Smith lived here, a lot of greats. But just its grandeur says something. The legislature went out in 1860 and they wanted to get the best house in the city for the governor of the state, regardless of who the governor was, Democrat, Republican. They were coming close to finishing the state capitol. The state capitol was $30 million, took 30 years to build. It was the most expensive public works in the nation at the time. If you're here, you should go through the Capitol, especially the second floor. Nothing's wrong with the third floor. But if you're going to the Assembly, they charge you to go into the Assembly. Second floor is free. It's my floor. God bless you. Go to my floor. But you look at that Capitol. They had stone workers from all around the world. It is magnificent. And when you look at the Capitol, which was basically the office building, this residence was really the social venue for them. And the two together, they were making a very powerful statement that this is New York. It's the greatest state in the nation. They're in public service. They're honored to be in public service. They're proud of public service. And they were building beautiful monuments to democracy. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. And we became nervous about being in government. And we became ashamed to be in government. And God forbid government spends money. You know, that's a bad thing. We've been working over the years to get the pride in government back, to get the honor in public service back. And I think we've come a long way. But this House and the Capitol really speak to that. And the men we honor today really speak to that. Congressman Rangel will literally be in the history books as a legendary figure. This is not just, oh no. He will go down in the great history books as a pioneer in public service, a pioneer for civil rights. He was one of the original trailblazers who went a far distance. The distance Congressman Rangel traveled from where he started to the Congress in Washington, D.C. was a lifetime. He is one of the longest-serving congresspeople. He's chairman of Ways and Means. He's a war hero, Brown Star, Purple Heart in Korea. There hasn't been a significant piece of legislation in the past 30 years that he hasn't been part of, marched with Dr. Martin Luther King. He is truly a man of history and a man who many young people will be inspired by, and they should be. He was on the judiciary when they investigated President Nixon. He was part of the investigation of the apartheid movement. He almost single-handedly passed President Barack Obama's stimulus agenda. He did pass single-handedly what we call the empowerment zone legislation. That made a big difference in Harlem. That made a big difference all across the nation. I actually ran that program. Our current program, the Regional Economic Development Councils that we run statewide, is based on the Empowerment Zone program that Congressman Rangel passed, and is to this day the best thinking on urban policy in the United States. That's what that Empowerment Zone program is all about. When he was here, when he was in Albany, he was one of the original founders with Congressman Garcia on the Caucus that we now celebrate today. Back then, it was just a dream. So he will be in the history books. But I have my own book on Congressman Rangel. He's a couple of years older than I am. I'm catching up to him. I don't know how that's happening, but at one time I was a young fella, and Congressman Rangel was basically a contemporary of my father's. And it's about 40 years I've been watching Congressman Rangel. It was Congressman Rangel, Mayor Dinkins, Percy Sutton, God rest his soul, and Basil Patterson, God rest his soul, Carl McCall. They were the original trailblazers, pioneers. They put Harlem on the map politically, and they were true crusaders for justice. And these were, no, give them a round. And they were bigger than life. They were bigger than life. You have to remember, it was a lot harder what they were doing than what we're doing today. Because they were the first ones to walk across that path. They were the first ones to walk through that deep snow. It's a lot easier to be second and to follow those footsteps. They were going where no one had gone before. For an African-American man to say, I'm going to run for Congress, I'm going to run for mayor. These were firsts, and it was really, really hard. I used to talk to David Patterson about what his father went through versus what I went through. And we used to say, whatever we do, we can never accomplish that same distance that they covered. And it was really a testament as to who they were and who they are to this day. And in some ways, it was simpler and it was harder. It was simpler. They were there to do the right thing. They were going to fight the good fight. And you know what? They knew the good fight was a fight. They knew they were going to get bloodied doing what they were doing. And they knew it wasn't going to be easy. But the calculus was simple. They were there to serve people who needed help. It's what Senator Andrea Stewart Cousins said. They had people who they represented who were getting the short end of the stick over and over and over again, and their people needed a champion, and they were there to be that champion. And they knew that power doesn't just come easily. You want to take power from one source and give power to another source. The source that has the power doesn't want to give it up. And it's not just saying, by the way, I want to point out disparity in power. People see the disparity in power. They just don't want to change the disparity in power. And you're going to have to change it. And to change it, it is a struggle. And their whole mentality was, I'm here to deliver for my people, and if it's the right fight for my people, I'm going to wage that fight. I don't care how much blood I shed. I don't care how much pain I take. I'm going to deliver for my people. Politics today has gotten more complicated. It's gotten more complicated. In some ways, we're more timid. We think too much. Well, if we do it, we got this interest group is going to be unhappy, and then this interest group is unhappy, and God forbid we make anybody unhappy, because we don't want to make anybody unhappy, because we want to make everybody happy. Again, we want everyone smiling. You want to do the big things that these gentlemen did. You're not going to make everybody smile. It's not going to happen. You want to spend your life in politics making people smile, they'll smile. You won't get anything done worth a damn, but they'll smile. But their model is a simpler, purer model of what public service can be all about. Remember who you're there to serve, damn the torpedoes, and bring home the bacon and get the accomplishments, because just fighting the fight, unless you win, isn't enough. I was thinking of Congressman Rangel this week. Congressman Rangel, Congressman Garcia, David Dinkins, Basil Patterson, my father, were all cut from the same cloth. They were all coming from the poor neighborhood, black neighborhood, white neighborhood, it didn't matter. My father was a poor Italian guy, and he was facing the same obstacles, the same barriers. And he and Congressman Rangel, very, very similar in outlook and personality. If he was fighting the right fight, he did not give a darn about what the consequences were. I spent 20 years in politics with him. He never asked me to take a poll, never asked me what the interest groups wanted, never asked me what the donors were going to say, never asked. Never asked. Literally, technically we took a poll once. I was feeling funny because we never took a poll, and everybody's saying to me, what did the polls say? What did the polls say? And we didn't have a poll. So we took a poll, and we paid a lot of money for it, and I brought the poll to my father, and I said, he was governor, I said, you know, we took a poll. Do you want to know what the poll said? He said, no, I don't want to know what the poll said. I said, well, we paid a lot of money for it. You may as well know what the poll said. He said, well, I already know what the poll said. I said, no, you don't know what the poll said. I said, how about this question? Do you favor the death penalty? He said, do you favor the death penalty 50-50? I said, no. 80% of the people in the state favor the death penalty. He said, they're all wrong. That's who they are. That is who they are. So I'm thinking about my father. I'm thinking about Congressman Rangel this week. And we've been working on doing better in terms of housing discrimination. There's a very simple law passed in 1968, honored Martin Luther King's death. Fair housing law. You cannot discriminate in housing basis race, color, creed, sex, period. And we've been having meetings and meetings. How do we do a better job? Because really, we're not doing a great job enforcing the fair housing law. As a matter of fact, we haven't taken an action against a real estate broker in a while, like 15 years, okay? So we're having conversations, and they're saying to me, well, you know, if we do this, the brokers are going to get mad. If we do this, the sales agents are going to get mad. If we do this, the landlords are going to get mad, and the Landlords Association and the Homeowners Association. And meetings, nothing happening. And I thought of the congressman, I thought of my father, and I said, this is what we're going to do, nice and simple. The law is the law. We're going to go out, we're going to hire investigation firms to do undercover investigations where they will send out a white person to look at the apartment. Then they'll send out an African-American person. Then they'll send out a woman with a Section 8 voucher. Then they'll send out an Hispanic male. And we'll see if we get the same answer. And if we don't, you violated the law. It's not just unethical, it's illegal. We will prosecute the law. If you're a real estate broker or sales agent who does it, you're licensed by the state of New York, you're going to lose your license. Period. And that's what we're going to do. Because when you think the way they think, it gets much simpler. $15 minimum wage. Why? Because we don't pay people what they're worth in this city and this state. Family leave. Why? Because people have a right to spend quality time with their family when someone's dying or when a baby is born and they can't afford to take off. This morning I said Rikers Island. They asked me about Rikers Island should be closed. I said close it. It's been the subject of federal civil rights investigations, innumerable cases where people have been abused. Design a better building. We don't need the federal government to come in here and have a civil rights investigation against New Yorkers. We wrote the human rights law. Nobody needs us to tell us not to discriminate. They have a simpler, stronger view of what public service is all about, and they had tremendous guts in deploying it. Two quotes that remind me of Congressman Rangel. One from one of the greatest leaders ever, Martin Luther King, and one from the good book. Martin Luther King, who talked about the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But Martin King never said it bends on its own. He was saying it can be bent, but you have to work to bend it. And he said human progress is neither automatic nor inevitable. Every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concern of dedicated individuals. That's Congressman Rangel, a man who has spent decades bending the curve of justice successfully. The good book, James 2nd, 17 to 18. Faith by itself, it is not, if not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by deeds. Congressman Rangel, in the words of Martin Luther King, he brought justice to society. He helped those without power achieve equal rights. He honored the words of our Lord by practicing what he preached, by delivering in deeds and not in words. That is what has made him an extraordinary leader, a man who has inspired, I'm sure, many people in this room, and a man who has inspired and continues to inspire me. We're going to give Congressman Rangel a medal from the state of New York. We call it the Governor's Medal for Outstanding Public Service. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a great welcome to the great Congressman of Harlem, Congressman Charles Rangel.
Thank you so much, Governor. Thank this wonderful crowd. My wife, for over 50 years, said, don't you go up there and re-enlist now. I just hope that all of you will have the opportunity to say that God was so good to you that she allowed you to do her work through you. So at the end of the day, you can say with all honesty that you never had a bad day. Because bad days are relative. But when you've had the opportunity to even think that you can pay back to people who you've never met, for people who never met you, that is so spiritual, and I'm so close to judgment that I'm leaving it alone. The governor finds such comfort in dealing with scriptures. But there's only one that I know that defies any religion, any place, or any circumstance. Of course, I've kind of put it in Lenox Avenue terms. But I remember as an altar boy, there was a story that a whole lot of wealthy people were giving Jesus a hard time because he said they could not get into the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus was explaining to them that he was hungry, he was homeless, he was addicted, he was poor, he needed health care, he needed Social Security, he was being shot down by a white car. And they said to him, Jesus, you got the wrong guys. We never treated you that way. And he said something like, no, you didn't. But as you treated the lesser of my brothers and sisters is how you got to be treated. He ended up telling them go straight to hell. And I've been trying that philosophy all my life. You know? And it's been so easy. Bobby Garcia, Dave Dinkins, and I were driven down here by the graciousness of the governor from New York City, and we were talking about how good it is to be old. You can tell any damn story that you want, and hardly anybody can challenge it. And Bobby Garcia, we can tell stories of things that happened in Korea, on the East Side, in San Juan. And of course, he has his young wife here that she'll try to challenge, but this is what God gives you to compensate for the fact that you may not be walking as fast as you used to, but there's so many other benefits. And I'd like to conclude with a story, and I hope nobody here needs to go to the barber shop, because, Governor, you can use this story at times like this when there's such a temptation to try to express how the gratitude that I feel for this honor, which is not for today, but for all the days that I've enjoyed what I was doing. And symbolically, I should be giving this to somebody that made it possible for me to be here rather than with so many of my friends that were raised on 32nd and Lenox Avenue, what happened to them. But the story goes that in the midst of a fiery sermon, a young man in church got up and began to walk out. And the pastor said, "Young man, just where do you think you are going in the middle of my sermon?" And the young man said, "Pastor, I am going to the barber shop." And the pastor said, "Did you ever think about going to the barber shop before coming to church?" And he said, "Pastor, before you started speaking, I didn't need to go to the barber shop." So I know we have a long evening, but Mr. Speaker, Madam Leader, and these are dreams that Percy Sutton, Basil, David, and I never had. We never had these things. God gives you enough to keep you going. But one of the beautiful things about this governor and his daddy is that they recognize that what made this country was not a whole lot of words. You can bet your life those rascals that drafted the Constitution weren't thinking about anybody from Africa or Italy. They weren't thinking about Muslims or Mexicans. But God has been good enough for this Constitution to be so flexible, to allow us not to have the things we want, but to be able to dream and to assure our kids and our grandkids that if you do the right thing and you work hard, that only in this country can you go to sleep at night and think that you may make it. So, Governor, my wife said not to allow your charm to allow me to re-enlist. And we're going to be able to not quit the struggle, but regain our sanity from what is going on in Washington. And I hope all of you saw the debates last night, because if you did, you can pass over Saturday Night Live this weekend.
As we conclude our program, I would just like to acknowledge a few other public servants that are here today, a part of the governor's administration. Of course, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. The Secretary to the Governor, Bill Mulrow, is here as well.